Awesome. Hey guys.
Hey Chip, thank you for having us here, and great sessions from everyone prior to us. So thank you, Keith. Welcome to the call as well. But
Oh,
before
thank
we
you.
start, let me give you a brief introduction on myself and for Keith as well, and we will kick it off.
Excellent.
So,
I'm dropping out.
alrighty. So hi everyone. My name is Gaurav Saini. I'm a VP of Sales Engineering and Business Consulting here at WorkSpan. I was previously VP of Customer Success and have been working on many of the different companies who have joined the WorkSpan ecosystem cloud. Very excited to be hosting Keith Prince here with us today. Keith is the Managing Director of Global Market Development at Dell. Keith, great to have you on the call today. And to kick us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your current role and charter at Dell.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And by the way, to the WorkSpan team, thank you for the opportunity to participate in the forum. I guess I'm the anchor on this relay, so I got the baton, so I got to bring this home with you, Gaurav. So I'll be pretty precise in the follow-ups. Keith Prince has been at Dell roughly about 15 years in various roles ranging from managed services to complex deals, and the last 3 years in global alliances. I head up a team that we'll talk a bit further about in global alliances focused on market development, of which you'll hear a lot of discussion today around partner growth planning, and we'll cover off a number of those items. The theme that I've seen in all the years within Dell and in this market is that these roles have required of us not just to be accountable to making the objectives of the business and run the business, but we've had to do some innovation on new approaches, new models, new processes to go either meet a large significant client demand, or now, as we've been seeing over the last 5-6 years, a whole shift in the market demand and how people are acquiring technology, utilizing, et cetera. And now, as recently with COVID, another shift in the uptick about how virtual and remote solutions are required for not just our industry, our customers' industries to go and innovate and and be relevant in this new shift that we're going in. So it's a constant change of innovation that we're dealing with in this environment, which drives a whole new level of how we prioritize on which initiatives and solutions.
Well said, Keith. Well said. And to move on to the next question, let me also cite something that Harmeet and Mayank brought on in the first session as well. One of the things that Harmeet talked about was this pivot to co-innovation across that's happening as a major trend across many different industries right now. And I felt like that had great synergies with what our session is here about the partner growth program, the PGP program. So keeping that in mind, tell us a little bit about what PGP is, what the charter of the program is, and how is it that you are operationalizing this at Dell?
Certainly. Within global alliances, we have an ecosystem of roughly 80 plus partners, ranging from large SIs, SOs, and a portfolio of CSPs. And everybody is shifting their models to be relevant in their marketplace for them. The PGP we invested in a number of years ago we took an approach of saying all partners are not equal, all partnerships are not equal. And I'll explain that first. You can have partners, and this is totally fine, that we're doing transactions with in the market and being successful based on those transactions. I call that meeting, putting your capabilities together to inflect at the point that on the client requirement, and that's fine. And then you have partners that are putting further capabilities together and enabling each other. This is your certifications, your training, et cetera, to be relevant in the market. And then you could shift even further right and ask the question of going, if we really put jointly integrated solutions together and took them proactively into market and measured ourselves accountable to those solutions and the go-to-market effort, how they do demand generation, demand fulfillment, and do joint business planning, and then hold each other accountable by having the governance on there. What do we require to go and succeed in that category? So I mentioned earlier, we have a portfolio of 80 different partners. The PGP, we apply roughly into 15 of those partners. And what we're looking for in the PGP, which is basically a portfolio of solutions, right? Clear and identified metrics and outcomes under a business plan, and that cadence of governance, which I heard in the opening session, a critical element of what we do. So the message in here is that the PGP is in place for those partners that we feel that we're going to put joint sweat equity in and lean in together to take advantage of scaling out rapid growth in a current market, or even going after new markets together for us to be highly relevant to each other and going forward. So the PGP gets applied on a very select basis. For the last thing you want to do is, if you have a partner that you're doing good transactions with and getting good success, you don't want to over-resource your limited capability, your limited resources that you have in planning. You want to provide the right level of plan, the right level of resources to the right outcomes of the joint partnership that's going to target. So at a very high level, PGP is there to design to go and apply to that category of partnerships that we have.
Well said, Keith. And looking at the Partner Growth Program, aka PGP, you've taken a very holistic approach to this problem, right? I mean, you are looking for specific types of partners to go to market with, to co-innovate and bring holistic solutions that you want to go out and target specific verticals and customers with. But I've also heard you say off and on again that we do not prioritize partners, we prioritize plans. So as you think of PGP and going to market with select group of partners, what does this planning look like, and how does this planning and this execution of that plan lend itself to the revenue goals that Dell is going after? Can you help paint that picture for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned earlier, and I thank you for putting that catchphrase back out there. We don't prioritize partners, we prioritize plans. In the end, if we have partners, and this is proving out, by the way, we're proving this out, that with partners that we've got this vested PGP approach, there's significant year-over-year revenue growth that we have together based on achieving. And we've been proving that. So a number of these partners we've been in play with 4 years on these plans, and others are emerging into it. The 3 common elements that we look for is that it's just not about putting a wrapper around a business as usual. We really want to understand what we're going to get incrementally in scale. So put a dotted line around the BAU and go, what's working in there? Yes, included in the governance, but now we're going to ask the question of going, what are the really incremental solutions that we need to be accelerating into the market? How do we get faster time to revenue on those? I loved a term I heard from a partner the other night on a call. They were talking about, we're in an innovation phase. How fast can we get those innovations to turn into orders? Or in their case, they talk about billings in their environment. So the portfolio of solutions is critical. The elements of what we have in context of the business planning, so the metrics, what revenue objectives we're going to get, and then do a bottoms up associated to it. That's a lot of lifting to go and put those 2 together. And then the discipline to sit down, as I articulated on the governance, for us to review that and ask the question, no different than your stock portfolio, maybe not a good analogy these days, but if you look at it on a quarterly basis, you want to have quantifiable data and ask the question, the solutions that you all invested in and brought into market, are they working, and have the data behind them and understanding why they're working or not working? And then ask the second question, on a limited set of resources and dollars, where do you wish to continue to invest or divest and put somewhere else? So the planning has all those dials in it. And I think today what was really good is we've been stress tested through COVID to ask the question of going, okay, we were planning X before COVID. Now with COVID, we want to go and look at this solution, thermal imaging based on a smart city platform. How do we adapt and change to that and not be dilutive to the other efforts that we have out there? So there's a criteria that we apply to it. Many of my peers, when we get engaged in the process of having a discovery session of what we would do in PGP, we're being very challenging of ourselves and our partners of what we would really gain from it, and ask the question of where we are on that dial of what we want to go and get out of it before you over-resource, over-plan for the wrong outcome.
Absolutely, Keith. Absolutely. I love the fact that you've taken a very data-driven approach to something that in the past has not had a very data-driven approach. So my next question is going to be kind of two-part for you. One is, once again, kind of going back to what Harmeet said in the beginning, right? He said that there are a few challenges in co-innovation, and there were five kind of things that were top of his mind, right? He said agility, governance, or he said, trust, governance, accountability, agility, and in the end, measuring output and ROI. I know that you have thought and operationalized the partner growth program in a very similar way. So can you talk to the audience about two things? One, what types of data are you collecting as your partners go through co-innovating and launching and then co-selling with you during these different types of journeys? What types of data are you collecting? And number two, how is technology helping you make this easier? Because this is hard, and this involves a lot of different people across organizations, across your own regional silos, so on and so forth.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm going to answer that based in two forms. One is going to be on a quantitative side, and then we should discuss the qualitative side of it. On the quantitative side, once our plan is up and implemented, we are looking at tying together. We have certain solutions / offers that we expected to go and drive revenue, incremental revenue that we would cover off in the PGP plan. So we can track that. Now, as I say that, we track that in a lot of disparate ways and with some very smart individuals on the team who do a fair bit of triangulation through disparate sources to go and do that. So it doesn't scale very well. So we have the luxury of doing that right now in context of the number of partners that we're engaging on the PGPs on. But if we want to go and expand this and wrap this around other initiatives, et cetera, we've got to be more seamless in how we're tracking that data. And this is one of the factors where WorkSpan came to the table, or why we brought WorkSpan to the table for us. The other aspect is, when we're looking at building those solutions, it's not just revenue. So there's also another factor going for example, we have a lot of edge discussions today, a lot of IoT, et cetera. I'll use an example. We've done a smart city initiative with a global partner. There was more learnings going on in there about commercial structures and models of how to take that to market that we were capturing. And then we reset the revenue objectives that the program had based on the learnings in the first quarters that we were experiencing on it. So we revised that down, and that only comes from effective tracking in that environment. And the final that we look for in here, and we want to really get a better line of sight into, is once you're in the go-to-market with the demand generation, yet alone to demand fulfillment, we want to be better at understanding how leads are truly being generated and why and what are really being converted, and then identify and show the lift that's involved in that. We also want to identify why leads are being abandoned as compared to leaving it to perception. And this is another element while we brought WorkSpan to the table on it. And try to bring that to a single lens of view as compared to having the more disparate views you have, the more subjectivity. And then I'm going to go back to a comment made earlier. You want to have good trust. You want to have good trust on single views of it. And that's where we're really wanting to attain to. And the final will be on the qualitative side. On the qualitative, when we're doing the PGPs, it also allows us to have a measure of are we really tracking on the intent of the partnership? And this is where the governance and the QBRs work, but it also evolves beyond that with a number of the touch points that occur through the relationships and the scale of them. And I want to just anchor this with one more. Many of the times we're engaged on PGPs, as I said earlier, it wasn't being wrapped around just a BAU. We're into very strategic initiatives like integrated practices, right, to go forward. Those are big lifting items to go after new markets or new business models. And to do that, you've got to have a very structured set of plan to move those gates forward and measure the success on them and ask the question based on success and metric. Do you continue leaning in? Do you dial back on those? So it's a lot more than just saying, let's take our technology, wrap it with our partners' capabilities and call it a day. It's really about to what element are we being integrated to go to market, not just on technology, with commercial structures, IP, capabilities, et cetera. So a little bit of qualitative dials in there that we need to have line of sight to.
Nicely said, Keith. And to operationalize such a program, and when I'm thinking of PGP itself, like what KPIs, like what are some Uber KPIs that you are tracking? What lends itself to the ultimate kind of answer? Like, is this program a success or a failure? Talk to us a little bit about that. Maybe it will resonate with folks who are also thinking of going to market with, with different partners and putting together some co-innovation programs. What are some key metrics, some key Uber metrics that they should be looking at and tracking as they think of launching their programs?
So, the common denominator you've heard me speak to in here is basically a solution portfolio. And internally on our end, we use the word design war. So are we winning the design war with our partners? Are we really in the solution space that they're taking? And we've got sort of three spectrums to it. There is still a legacy market. Everybody on this call is still dealing with a legacy market in the enterprise. We have to solve that for our customers, and this is where the cost takeout is. Dell has an extremely broad portfolio that addresses not just legacy, but what we're doing in IT transformation and digital transformation. But we also are a significant innovator. And this is where the earlier comments, especially in the opening session on innovation, how do we go and wrap solutions around in the market and commercialize them jointly, especially in the context of IoT, edge, et cetera, and have realistic objectives around those programs. So a big area that we get a lot of focus on and continued to focus on is you build these solutions. We need to have line of sight and ask the questions, where are we in the process on those solutions being built from innovation to commercialize and have a single lens view across solutions, across all the partners? We need to understand also how they're doing commercially, as my earlier comment, how they're performing in the market. Are we getting traction? Are we getting pipeline generation? Are we getting feedback associated to them? Because in the end, that's the common denominator that you've wrapped your objectives on and you've wrapped your go-to-market on, of which you're governing. So that's the common denominator that gets a lot of time and focus. Another factor goes into that is we are a very broad company at Dell, as I said, with an extensive portfolio that I think we dominate or number one in most of the categories. However, in order for us to succeed on these solutions, and my peers will attest to this, you just can't have the alliance organization being the bridge to it. Those BUs, those engineering groups, those stakeholder groups on both sides of the entity need to be connected in, and they're asking the questions of metrics, outcomes, how we report on it, because they have their obligations and priorities to go and answer to.
Absolutely, Chris. And in our previous conversations, you've mentioned this as well, that like without the BUs and the practices really aligning behind your go-to-market, behind your common goals, it's very hard to achieve that revenue number that you're going after. Of course, the revenue number for the company, but also the revenue number that Global Alliances is influencing. So how do you build alignment between BUs and practices? Can you talk a little bit to the audience about that? Because that usually is a challenge.
So that's one of the core areas that my team is engaged in. And again, it comes from, I love the opening statement, trust. We've earned a trust within both my direct peer organization and with a number of the BUs that we have been engaged into our partners. So if we don't come in with an effective set of weapons and tools with those plans, proven on other, I mentioned earlier, we've had a number of successes on those commercials. If we didn't have that, I don't think we'd be invited to the table, number one, internally. So your first customer is your internal peer set to go after. Your second is your partner side of the equation. And for many of them, when we lay out the plan and lay out how we go about it, for some partners, they may not be enabled to lean in as deep, and we just need to understand that up front. But they'll take the benefit of it, and they will scale if we're understanding how much sweat equity they can bring into it. Once we have that, we lean back over into our BUs, our core sponsors, and thus on the partner side too. And the common denominator that I have seen is if you just have it in a couple of PowerPoints with a lot of very grandiose, big bet, we hear that a lot. We're going to go and do a big bet. If you don't have that plan, that how you're going to dissect that down into really measurable outcomes, and that you're leading them. The analogy I use, being in Colorado, is you've got a lot of people that are very good skiers inbounds, and there's a lot, and there's good trail maps, and they know where they're going, and the risk is pretty minimal. We're taking you out of bounds, and we're the experts out of bounds, and we know how to avoid false summits and protect you from the risks. You just have to let us guide you through there, but we need you with us following that plan. And that's sort of how we operate. And the more you do it and the more success you have, other people will engage you in to go. If you force yourself on them and they're not ready for it, and you're being overly prescriptive and not adapting to maybe some of the short outcomes, you'll lose the audience in there. Bit of a lengthy answer, but that's part of the DNA to get it done.
No, it's perfect. This execution to the plan is pretty awesome, right? And this kind of goes back to your earlier statement that you don't prioritize partners, you prioritize plans. But then once the plan is built, going back to Harmeet's point, how do you drive accountability? Well, when you have a single pane view, a common single pane of glass that's showing you how you're pacing against the goals that you had set for the joint solutions that you were taking to market, then that accountability, then that trust starts to form, and you can actually execute to that goal and adjust as needed.
Absolutely. I mean, we see this a lot in our function and our roles, and it's completely understandable. So I call them false summits. You can get everybody together, and then they're looking at something that's been maybe dictated from a couple of CEOs meeting, which is awesome, and that's where great thought leadership comes from. Part of the job, though, day one, is to go through that and really understand, is that the correct objective? Is it a realistic one we can succeed upon? And even break it down further into steps as compared to making something a massive long exercise that parties will fall into what I call basically deal and program exhaustion, right? And that happens a lot. So you need to make them very concise and quick decisions, clear decisions on moving forward and continued investment.
Awesome, Keith. Yeah, this is definitely a really good program. I love the way that you're executing it. What is next for you? What's the growth opportunity here for PGP?
A couple of things. One, we don't prioritize on the plan or the partner. It's on the plans. I think we're now revisiting this in context in order to scale better tools, thus the approach that we're looking at with WorkSpan. We're also looking at how to shift more into a shared service. I think it's out of necessity. We need to do this to scale. And the other observation we've made, and it's more quantifiable. We've sort of done the math to it. Some partners, you don't need to put a complete tied together plan, partner growth plan. It goes into what we've been discussing with WorkSpan. Right? We think there's programs and initiatives with partners that we can apply the discipline to. And then you get those launched and proven, and then we sort of want to treat that as a layer that we build upon, as compared to how we've been engaged in the past is put something large, the two entities together on a partner growth plan. Maybe we should start this out with a couple of initiatives, programs, and build on it, on the success, and avoid big, massive lifts where people are trying to see line of sight to what summit we're on. So that's a big area, and to do that, we can't just keep on hiring in really smart resources. We would love that ability, but we got to go and scale on process and tools and approach. So we're rethinking some of those aspects.
Absolutely. Makes sense. Makes sense, Keith. For the audience here, any best practices or key takeaways that you would like the audience to take from this session?
Yeah, I'll break it into two, if you're okay with that. I think one, when we talk about these partner growth plans, the biggest thing we have our team is capable of doing is go and have the challenging conversations, have them early, have them very upfront and challenge the thinking jointly and collectively. It's critical as compared to saying, let's just go and execute. And I think that is a big plus up front, and many of our partners respect that fact up front and be willing to shift and adapt possibly based on how those dialogues and the thinking goes as you pull people into that process. And on the WorkSpan side, one of the big things we've really enjoyed with your team it forced us to go back and do what I call process normalization. A little more than I ever anticipated, but it was very effective for us to go back and look for how we solution and get normalization on that so that we could come back to your team on effective design. Same on the go-to-market, and try to bring that up to a normalized level, simplified level, so that we could be effective on it. And it forced us to do a lot of good mapping internally with our stakeholders. And the lifting on our side to lean in with your team is really bring in some good subject matter domains. And we've had that privilege with a number of the team members we've had working with yours in a very transparent way to move the dial. So that's the guidance I give.
Thank you for saying that, Keith. I really appreciate that. And I would just start by saying this, that I think everybody who's in the audience today, if you want to really understand how Keith has taken something that has traditionally been an art form and converted that into science, so to speak, please feel free to reach out to him or to the WorkSpan team. I love how you have taken a very complex goal building process and turned it into somewhat simple, easy to grasp, prescriptive for your partners and internal teams at Dell. So thank you for sharing your journey with us and your program with us today. And I would like to turn it back over to Chip now and the audience for questions.
Appreciate it, Rob. Thank you.
Great session, guys. Keith, awesome. I love the partner growth program concept and this concept of prioritizing plans, not partners. So awesome. Hey, Amit. Amit's joined as well.
Hey, Keith. Nice to see you here.
You too, Amit. Pleasure.
Thank you for all the wonderful partnership.
Absolutely. Same.
So a couple questions, but we're a little maybe tight on time. So, but here's a good one. When working with your GSI partners, what are your key asks from them, and how do you measure their contribution to your joint goals?
So you got to remember, these are large global partners. So the key asks, and we're specific into the PGP, the key asks are, number one, we bring a team to the table. We're looking for them to lean in accordingly. That's the sweat equity I always refer to. And you can test that all the time. And then what we've seen mainly in the SIs and the SOs, that they do not hesitate on that, number one. Number two, get early acceptance of which plan is right. It's like the template discussion, but get early acceptance of which model makes sense. Some partners actually, we've learned, have some effective tools and approaches that we should incorporate. And then at the same token, we've seen other partners take what we have built and said, we're going to go and use this to expand, have a country or another theater discussion to expand on. So getting that collaboration early on the right process, right tools, and then the challenge, bring the table to have the challenge conversation and be transparent and blunt. And we get that all the time.
Awesome. Excellent. Good. Great session. Keith, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your thoughts and expertise with everyone. So and you guys at Dell are doing some amazing things.
Thank you. So Chip, we got the baton across the finish line. We're good.
You did it.
All right.
Well done, Keith.
Time.
Thank you so much.
Time.